Lord, please bless this meeting and all those that are in attendance, that everybody got here safely and will get home safely. Please give all of us on the commission the wisdom to make good decisions for the citizens of Canby. In your name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to thank everybody for coming out on this end of summer evening. If you could take a moment and silence your cell phones, that would be greatly appreciated. So the first order of business is citizen input on non-agenda items. What that means is that the agenda, which you have back there, if you'd like to speak on anything else, not on the agenda. Anybody? Okay. The minutes from the last meeting are not available because I don't know how this works, but the person that writes these up, they give them a vacation after all these years. I don't get that, but there you are. So Brian, do we have some new business?
No new business.
Okay, we're smoking right along. Okay, we will move into the public hearing phase. So first we will consider a request from Icon Construction and Development, LLC, for an annexation and zoning map amendment to annex 9.61 acres consisting of 3 tax lots and adjacent right-of-way located between North Pine Street and North Oak Street at Northeast 15th and Northeast 16th Avenues, and rezone from County RRFF-5 to R1 low-density residential. That would be ANN 18-03/ZC 18-03 North Pine. So the matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out the public testimony card and give to the recording secretary at the appropriate time when your name is called. Please step forward to the microphone, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each. The opponents will be given 5 minutes each. And those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become a part of the record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with previous testimony. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest to please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Okay. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Okay. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? Okay. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, Brian will give the staff report, then we will ask questions. I will open the public hearing for testimony. The applicant will testify not more than 15 minutes. The proponents, not more than 5 minutes. Opponents, not more than 5 minutes. Those thought to be neutral, not more than 5 minutes. And then rebuttal by the applicant, if necessary, not more than 10 minutes. At that point, we'll close the public testimony. We'll ask some questions. Then we'll discuss and deliberate the situation. No additional testimony unless specifically allowed by the chair. The decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Any questions? Okay, Brian, all yours.
Thank you, Commissioner Savory, and I see we're short a few bodies tonight, but we've all equally valuable planning commissioners that are here tonight.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So valued.
This request is an annexation. Associated with every annexation is the change in the zoning of the property from the county zoning to the city zoning. In this particular case, we have the zoning map shown up here. Indicates that the surrounding zoning on 3 sides, south, east, and west, to the east, this parcel over here across Pine has been annexed. Our map is just out of date. The property's in the hatch between Oak and Pine. We have R1 zoning, and that's what the comprehensive plan shows for this particular tract of land that's being proposed to be rezoned. And then to the north, we have the R1.5, the medium density zoning district. We usually see detached single-family homes in the R1 zone, and that is what they're proposing. They have submitted a tentative preliminary plat on how they intend to develop this, but just to make it clear, we're not reviewing the subdivision tonight in any manner, so that outline or preliminary plat is just tentative. It could potentially change before they actually submit an application if this annexation is approved. We talked about annexing 3 parcels. There's 2 tax lots here, indicates on the application form owned by CNS Acres LLC. And then there's another property owner in this little tax lot right here, has an existing home on it. Here's a larger map showing you the area in question, still undeveloped to the north in that R1.5 area. Here's an aerial showing you the 2 big tax lots. And on here you can also see there's apparently 2 existing homes. And you'll see when I show you the preliminary plat, they're planning on removing these 2 homes. And then the other lot owner, I was going to mention, that's Scott Van de Koevering that owns this particular tract. And he's joined in on this annexation, being right adjacent to it and such. You can see, let's just go on to the next one. I'll just go ahead and real quickly get into the approval criteria. 2 of the main things that you look at, and with the zoning change that's also occurring, is you're looking at the basic annexation criteria, and then with the zone change, you're looking at the same thing, except you're adding that dimension of making sure that as you bring property into the city and you give it our city zoning, that they have adequate utility services that can serve whatever is eventually proposed through a development application. So the applicant's provided and staff agrees that there's been conformance with these review criteria. One of the most important criteria, the second one in the annexation, is talking about a land needs analysis. The applicant did a pretty good job and pretty thorough job. One of the things that we mentioned in the staff report is we've had some other annexations, and what some of the analysis is showing is they try to make an indication based upon our population growth projections, using the official projections. Portland State University has been contracted by the state to make those official projections. Not everyone has the exact same number. This one says something about needing approximately 421 new household units. We had a previous one with the Cutsfords annexation that had a few less, but part of the difference may be separating units for something other than single-family homes, townhomes, or apartment units, trying to figure out, we want to try to provide the housing, and in this term, get the property annexed, have a subdivision come through, file the plat of records so there are lots for sale, so people have an opportunity to buy lots and build homes. And by city council policy, they've tried to simplify that process a little bit by us, instead of evaluating all available land, which isn't a very good measure because many of the parcels that aren't yet annexed may or may not be fully developable, may or may not have any interest on the part of the property owner to ever annex anytime soon. So the availability of that land for future development to serve the growing population isn't always relevant. So they narrowed that down to existing platted lots, which, if they're platted, means there's an assumption that all necessary utility services will be installed and available to serve those properties. So a good indication of a ready supply for new houses on those platted lots. The applicant indicated in his analysis that a 3-year supply is the policy that the council has indicated years ago that would be sufficient. Doesn't mean that we couldn't have more. It means that a minimum of 3-year supply is what we should be basing decisions on. We've had, as you know, some concern about increasing development, the resulting increased level of traffic. And so one way to address how quickly the city is expanding and growing, of course, is metering annexations in accordance with the land supply that's available. And so using that criteria in some fashion, it's there for a reason. It gives us that opportunity. That valve used to be handled by the community as a whole through the voter annexation that our charter provides for, but we no longer have that provision available to us because of state law superseded that. In this particular case, we come out really close on getting near our 3-year land supply if we utilize every existing plat that has come before us and been approved, and assume that they will all be platted and the lots will be developed and ready for sale and home building within the next 2 or 3 years. And there are question marks as to whether that is realistic or not. But the assumption that the applicant made is that every one of those would be available and included in his calculations. And he came out indicating that there's be about 43 lots remaining as needed. It just so happens that the preliminary plat that they're showing for this tract would accommodate about 40 lots. So indicating from that standpoint that more lots are still needed to meet the minimum 3-year supply. We did indicate in the staff report that they left out one subdivision, the most recent one we approved, which was the 90-lot subdivision down south on South Ivy. So there's where we indicated that it's a minimum standard. We can always have more. And one thing that supply, you know, there's all sorts of aspects that you can look at it, but one of them is thinking of the consumption rate. The applicant really didn't address that issue. For the past 10 years, we've been consuming about 45 lots a year. More recently, that's moved up to easily to be 65 lots a year. And if you really think about it, every home or subdivision right now, as quickly as a home is being built, it is consumed and bought and filled. And so you could say that right now we have a 100% consumption rate, and that as many lots as we can bring forward are going to be consumed. And so that's another way to think of the consumption in that manner as well. So we really feel like this passes the muster for the minimum 3-year supply. We're at the stage where we're starting to bump above the 3-year based upon the assumptions that every subdivision you've seen gets platted and gets developed in the next 2 or 3 years. And you do need to remember that it takes 2 to 3 years for that process to finish the annexation, finish the platting process, and the construction process of getting service to all these lots before they're actually for sale. This annexation is not in a development concept plan area. It is, however, by our annexation ordinance in a development agreement area. So you'll see attached to your packet a proposed development agreement. There's nothing too much really contained in that. The intent is that whatever we want to assure that the development application, when it comes in, demonstrates, we can put in that development agreement. And so we indicated in there a few things about where the streets will connect and understanding that they're going to provide all of the necessary infrastructure to fully serve this development. So it's all at the dime of the developer in doing that. Other than that, there's not too many earth-shaking things in that development agreement. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything else criteria-wise I really wanted to go through. So this is a copy of the preliminary plat for low-density residential cell development, single-family detached lots, meeting that general range between 7,000 and 10,000 square foot in size. And you can see currently they have a proposed cul-de-sac here, and they have a pedestrian connection. This can also provide the possibility of some utility connections if needed to loop water lines and things like that as well over to Pine Street. And then you have Oak Street would be finished. We had a subdivision, Caitlin's Landing, right across to the west. And they dedicated a little bit of extra width at that time to provide a half street for North Oak Street. We will obtain the other half of the street here, and there'll be additional dedication on North Pine. North Pine is still controlled and operated with maintenance by Clackamas County. We have some input that came in. I can't remember at this point whether it's in your packet or not, but it came from engineering department, just indicating that it still is their road and they will require frontage improvements. We do not anticipate the city taking over North Pine at this time. So we will be, and the developer, when he submits a development application, will be meeting the county road standards as it's improved with half-street improvements. So in our review of this, we did find that it met the approval criteria. Didn't mention, but it did conform with the transportation planning rule analysis. We had a quick memorandum from our traffic consultant indicating that the transportation plan that we have adopted fully anticipated the level of traffic that annexation, rezone, and development of this property would contribute to the city. Therefore, the transportation plan has addressed what improvements we need in the area already. And so a traffic study really wasn't needed other than that TPR analysis, which we did. I would anticipate that we probably will require a more detailed development traffic analysis when the development application comes in. So we have recommended approval of the annexation and designating the R1 zone that's in accordance with the comprehensive plan. Are there any questions?
Questions? Okay. Thank you, Brian. Okay, the developer, if you'll state your name and address, please. We've seen you before.
You have indeed. The record, my name is Rick Gibbons.
No, it's got to be green. There you go.
There we go. Try again. For the record, my name is Rick Givens. I'm a planning consultant for the applicant, Icon Construction and Development. Actually, they're this prospective purchaser. The individual property owners are technically the applicants for the annexation. Brian gave a very thorough staff report, so I will try to be brief. I would note that in meeting with the neighborhood folks, the primary concern that we heard was obviously Pine Street and the fact that it's not in very good shape as you get down towards the fairgrounds. Everybody knows that. And I would just point out here that for everyone who is here and probably will testify later, just to make absolutely clear, the development proposal is not a part of this application tonight. This is just talking about annexing this property to the city. As Brian alluded, most likely a more detailed traffic study will be required as part of the development application when and if we get to that stage. And we will be looking at what improvements are necessary. Typically, frontage improvements are what's required, and that's what we would expect in this property. We'd be giving additional right-of-way dedication and improving the frontage of the property. Brian talked about the needs analysis that I did for the property, and they snuck an additional one in on me after the application was filed before we came to hearing. I would note that if you look at the analysis, the lots listed for this year, 2018, there were about, I think, a total of around 100 of them listed. So a lot of those are going to get used up before the end of this year. So actually the 3-year window that we're looking at projects out a little further than what was assumed for all the lots that were considered in the analysis. Obviously, when you do a projection like this, you're making assumptions, and it could vary quite a bit. I think that what we're seeing generally throughout the metropolitan area is that lots closer into the Portland area are getting eaten up, and there's increasing development pressure on outlying communities. Oregon City can be to pick up some of the slack. Housing prices out here are less than they are in Portland and that kind of thing, so people are willing to commute. This property, I think you need to factor in when you look at that issue, the fact that it's surrounded by the city limits. It's an island right in the middle of the city. And you've got undeveloped streets on Oak Street in particular on the west side. You need Pine Street needing to be improved along the east side. And that the property to the north, which was recently annexed, I did some work for that property owner, and I expect that he'll be filing an application to develop that property that's already in the city. So this property is really kind of essential in terms of providing linkages that will complete the traffic system in the area, allowed for roads to be brought up to city standard, and provide general connectivity that really improves the area and hopefully alleviates some of the pressure on Pine Street, just because we'll have better connections going other directions. The site is well-served. There are services all around it, so developing this property in the future after annexation will make better, more efficient use of existing city facilities rather than some of the other annexations where you have to extend them beyond the current service area. This is something that is being filled in. The intent, as the conceptual site plan shows, is development of standard 7,000 square foot plus lots. In fact, the applicant's agreement with the property owners is that all lots be at least 7,000 square feet. That's part of their contract to buy the property. So there won't be any intention to provide any 6,000 square foot sneakers. They're all going to be at least 7. Beyond that, I think this property is, an ideal piece for development. It simply is flat, easily developed, no physical constraints. And as I said, it's one that really just kind of is a missing piece to the existing puzzle. So filling it in makes sense. We've addressed all the other approval criteria in my narrative, so I'm not going to go into that, but I'd be happy to answer questions and try to answer them if I can.
Any questions for Mr. Givens? Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. I have here Marissa Ibarra, Arcelli Ibarra. I hope I got that right. Correct me if I'm wrong. Robert Taylor, and they're all turning over their time to Regina Taylor. So Regina, if you could step forward, name and address, you have a bunch of time.
He thinks that's for the other marquee, the third item on our. I've got Marissa Ibarra. Pine Place. Same for Arcelli, Pine Place. And Robert Taylor, same Pine Place. And did I mischaracterize this?
That's for the south end, that's the second.
Oh, it's the second. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's also on Pine.
Okay,
South
my apologies.
It's South Pine.
Yeah, that's why it's confusing. There's two Pine Street ones.
Well, the first order of business will be to rename one of these so that there will be no confusion on my part. So, is there anybody who would like to testify for or against or is neutral on this particular development? Okay, in that case, no rebuttal necessary. We'll just scamper right along then. I will close the public hearing. Do we have any questions on this at all?
Seems like a good fit.
Can I ask a question
Well,
about this development here?
well, you'll have to come up here, state your name and address,
You'll have to open the hearing back up.
and then I have to reopen the hearing. So let's, okay, so the hearing is now reopened.
All right.
State your name and address,
Jean Robinson, 1370 North Pine Street.
okay?
And I'd like to, Pine Street's a mess. The county won't do anything. We put concrete in the holes ourselves to plug up holes right in front of the driveway. And the city won't do anything till the county brings it up, and then the city will take it over. And we don't need any more cars on Pine Street. There's children catching school buses, there's cars zooming by. It's hard to get in and out of the driveway sometimes. And I'd like to ask, if they do build that, could they annex it to Oak Street and not come out on Pine Street at all?
I don't know. That's not in our purview.
Well, I'd just like you to just take care of Pine Street first and then put in new houses.
I think
And we
that-
all pay that $5 a month road thing, but it doesn't do our road any good.
Well, I think that what Brian alluded to earlier is that the developer correct me if I'm wrong on this, Brian, but the developer is going to work with the county to upgrade and take care of Pine Street. It is in terrible condition, I know, but am I correct on
Yeah,
that, Brian?
one of the problems is, and all the people that utilize North Pine Street, I mean, we all recognize it's in horrible shape. And the problem is you do get improvements with development, but it's usually adjacent to, and it's not the off-site for the full distance of the
Right.
road that's
There's
in
no
horrible shape.
sidewalks.
So it's an incremental improvement of the road over time as the development occurs until we're able to stretch that street maintenance fee that the city collects. And they've been improving a lot of streets in town. Eventually, it will make it around to that particular road, but I
That's
can't tell
not
you
good
when.
enough.
I don't know when.
Eventually. It's been a long time, and there's no promises it'll get done in this children's lifetime that are on the street right now.
I think part of the issue too, Brian, and didn't you mention this earlier, Pine Street, that section of Pine Street is not owned by the city, and the city doesn't have authority to do that. It's owned by the
Right.
county, and so that the county needs
So
to.
do we need to go at the county and just ask them to close Pine Street or something, or what?
I don't know
how
that they
do-
could
how
close
do we
it, but you
deal
could
with this?
certainly go ask them to put it on the priority list to have it repaired. So
We just ask nice and they'll do it, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I just want, I said that, and if
Okay.
there's some child gets hit or something, I want you to know, I'm on record saying Pine Street's dangerous, and there should be some money spent on Pine Street.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak for or against or is neutral on this matter that would like to have a word? Okay.
Should allow him to rebuttal.
Did you want to have some rebuttal on that? No, it's fine. Okay. Any more discussion that you want to have on this? Sean?
I understand the concern on that. I've driven on Pine Street. It does, mess with your suspension. Again, being that it's a county road, there's not anything that we can say or do about it. It has to go before the county to do that. As far as what we're here to do, this meets, I think, everything that we have the authority to look at. So I think I would be in favor of the annexation.
Larry?
Yeah, I'm in favor of it. It's, the only reason it hasn't been annexed is I think the owners didn't want to at the time. I mean, it's right in the middle of the city. Pine Street's a problem, but they will be improving at least their half of it when it is developed. And that will have to meet this, not just the county standards, but our standards when it comes to sidewalks and driveways and stuff. So I'm in favor of it.
Larry?
I'd echo that.
Can I ask you, Brian, how soon do you think we can expect the city and the county to come up with some sort of agreement on Pine Street? Because I think that needs to be on our priority list of things to figure out.
There was a movement in the past 2 years. We apply for community development block grants, and there was, we were taking bites, and our number one priority was North Pine Street. And we actually submitted an application, was actually successful in doing 2 blocks way down south. However, I don't remember all of the reasons the city decided not to move forward with that particular, even though we were awarded it. And we were going to bite off little chunks over a 3 or 4 year period in obtaining those additional grant funds to help fund the improvement of that street. That idea hasn't gone away, and so we may still be doing that over time. And currently, to my understanding, North Pine is one of our top priorities, especially in terms of seeking grant funding to help make the improvement. We're working on North Maple right now. That's the city's project. It's very possible once that's taken care of, they may jump over with city funds as well to try to work on North Pine Street.
Would it be beneficial for residents to speak to our city council and ask them to make
They
that a priority?
certainly could. I'm sure at least all staff knows. I don't know how high it is in the minds of the city councilors right now.
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to deal with this with ANN 18-03 / ZC 18-03.
Mr. Chair, I motion to approve ANN 18-03 / ZC 18-03 North Pine.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. We will now move on to a request from Alan Manuel and Ed Netter Construction for a subdivision to consist of 6 common wall, single-family residential homes at 480 South Pine Street, SUB 18-03 Pine Place subdivision. The matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out the public testimony card and give it to the recording secretary. At the appropriate time, when your name is called, please step forward to the microphone, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each. The opponents will be given 5 minutes each. And those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become a part of the record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with previous testimony. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest to please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Okay. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Okay. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? Okay. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, Brian will give the staff report, then we will ask some questions. I will open the public hearing for testimony at that time. The applicant will have not more than 15 minutes. Other proponents, not more than 5 minutes. Opponents, not more than 5 minutes. Those thought to be neutral, not more than 5 minutes. And rebuttal by the applicant, not more than 10 minutes. That time, I will close public testimony. There will be more questions by us, if any. We will discuss and deliberate, and then we will make a decision at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. You have any questions? Okay. Brian?
Thank you, Commissioner. This is a quasi-judicial application, which means it's an actual development application. This is a subdivision. It's a little bit different than what we usually see in subdivisions because it's in the R2 high-density residential zone area. This is a copy of the zoning map showing that in the red hatch is the property less than a half an acre in size, 0.38 of an acre, and surrounded completely by high-density zoning. It's not entirely high-density development around it currently, but it is high-density zoning. Fronts on South Pine Street. Just a short distance to the north is the Canby Utility new building. I don't know if you have driven by there to see that facility. I've heard a lot of comments, not only about the beautiful building, but wow, they went all out with landscaping. It looks gorgeous right now. Let's see if they can maintain it over time. The aerial photo here shows a house on the northern part of the property. I believe that's being removed in order to accommodate 6 platted lots, which would accommodate 6 dwelling units with attached walls. So we're calling them townhomes. Our code actually calls them single family with common wall construction. This is pretty much the tentative plat or site plan showing the layout. So you have 2 different structures here with the attached walls, common walls here, showing the 6 platted lots. And the platted lots, this is showing you the outline of the building structure itself here, but the lots stretch the full distance from the east edge of the property all the way to the street right-of-way. And in that area, you not only have the structure, then you have a rear yard meeting the normal 20-foot setbacks in the zone for a 2-story structures that are proposed. And then you have a drive, an individual drive in front of each of the units to supply part of the needed parking. 2 units are required for each individual lot home, whether attached or not. And so they're supplying that parking. And then there is a common drive that goes across all of the lot boundaries. And so this was a solution after going through several different iterations before we got one that we felt actually met the requirements. The original plan we saw actually had parking spaces coming straight off the street, so all the cars had to back into the street. We just didn't think that was an acceptable solution for as many as they were proposing. So with this design, they're just barely providing room for 4 if you want to call them, extra visitor parking spaces in a parallel fashion. And that works out pretty well in a couple of areas. It leaves a wide enough drive for cars to be able to back out of these garages and from their parking area without hitting the cars as they back out. They tried some angle parking here, but they're actually too close. It would make it very difficult for anybody to back out of these driveways without hitting the cars. And I think it works as it is. I think it's functional now. And it does meet the minimum parking standards, and then adds these extra visitor parking. And for 6 units, it seems to be a fairly good ratio of what's likely to be needed. If for some reason additional visitors are at the same time, they do have parallel street parking on South Pine Street that's available as well. First come, first serve for that particular parking. You may want to clarify with because my brain's going foggy here, but my understanding was this was a one-way drive. I don't see that designated on here, but I believe that that's what the intent was. And that's what helps make it functional, is because of the one-way nature of that. Trying to think which drawing to show you. They're also indicated that there's some existing fencing, I believe, along the north and the east, and they're trying to do the same thing along the south boundary. I believe it's a chain link type fence with screening slats in it. And so the area, by adding the south boundary, I believe that completes the fencing that they were planning for the area and helping to screen it somewhat. I mentioned the common access road. The applicants developed a very early draft of that, and we included in the packet of a written access agreement that would be filed of record. Common shared access agreement and maintenance agreement, so that we have all of the property owners equally contributing to the future long-term maintenance of that particular shared driveway that crosses everybody's property. And we mentioned in the staff report that the applicant may want to consider adding see if I can get there's a private sidewalk here at the end of each of these individual parking spaces outside. And that sidewalk actually goes across all the individual lot lines as well. They might want to add that sidewalk as part of the shared driveway maintenance agreement, since everyone's kind of sharing that as well, and might be a reasonable thing to do. By using this, what I believe is the one-way drive, they've also, in parallel parking, they were able to free up some green space between the curb and the parking and drive. And so that's going to supply an area where we can have actual street trees in front of this particular development. I think that will add to it. And so we do have a condition of approval that they provide us a street tree plan and pay the applicable fee for each individual tree prior to moving forward with the plat being filed a record for this development. The next drawing is a utility plan. Staff asked for that, and it seems to be very informative for how they're serving each individual unit with water and sewer service along the common attached boundary lines. Is basically what you see here as a water and sewer line coming up to each of them in that manner. What we don't have is, and usually is done at the construction phase, is the final drainage plan. Typically on a subdivision, when you have the individual platted lots, ordinance requires you to retain all runoff on your own individual platted lot. So I'm anticipating that they're going to have roof gutters and drains that go out to the rear yards, and there's going to be soakage trenches to handle the stormwater runoff from the structures themselves. What I'm a little bit more concerned about is the common driveway and how that runoff will be handled, because it really needs to be kept on site as well. Individual single-family detached homes, they do allow some amount of water to drain into the street that's on the driveway itself. But this is probably more than is reasonable to have this entire shared driveway all go out to the public street, because again, you're supposed to detain as much runoff on site as you can. So we'll see what they propose at the construction stage on dealing with that particular drainage issue. This was necessary here in indicating to us that they were meeting the maximum impervious surface allowed on each platted lot. So the applicant went back, had his engineer help do the calculations, and they found out that 2 of the lots were having trouble going over that 70% maximum impervious. It's this lot right here, and you see the parking area and the parking area for this one down here where they're proposed, and the green is all pervious grass areas, where they're going to use permeable pavers in order to satisfy the ordinance requirement of not going over the 70% maximum impervious area. They're getting most of their impervious area in the rear lots, and the corner lots had plenty with the side area available to them as well. So that criteria has been met. All the necessary utilities are there in the street. The fire marshal submitted asking a question about whether the units are going to be sprinklered. Unfortunately, staff's been so swamped, we haven't been able to touch base with our public works and the applicant and try to iron out, so maybe they know tonight whether these units are planned to be sprinklered or not. And that's a kind of construction detail during the construction phase that we can work out, because we know the water's available, what kind of arrangement they'll need if they are sprinklered or not can be figured out by the utility companies at our pre-construction meetings. Trying to think if there's any other conditions that were kind of unique to this. The main thing really is the common shared access easement that is quite different. But as long as those documents are recorded, whenever you have anything that's a shared use, oftentimes it's open space provisions that cross or that are an amenity to a development. You need to think ahead, who's going to maintain that over time? And so as long as we get that document recorded and includes a maintenance agreement, I think that will take care of that. And somehow or the plat itself will designate and make a note of that agreement if it's a separate one filed of record with the plat that details the maintenance aspect. They probably won't write that on the plat itself. We do feel like it meets all the Canby Public Works design standards, and the city engineer did submit comments, and they're part of the condition of approval that they comply with all of those items that the city engineer outlined in his memorandum. So are there any questions about this particular request?
Questions?
No.
Okay, then we'll move on to, I don't have a card from Mr. Netter or any of the proponents. Is there anybody that wishes to speak in favor of this? There you are. I didn't see your name on the little card up here, so, you know. Name and address, please.
Hello, my name's Ed Netter. I live at 1847 South First Street in Canby. Thank you, Brian and Laney, for doing a good job on this application. Yes, we're applying for the 6-lot subdivision on this property. It meets the density, being with the 6 lots, if that is a question that ever comes up. I've also built 6 duplexes on this same street. There's one directly across part of this property. It's a flag lot, and then 5 others to the north of this property. Those all did access off of Pine Street, and that was like what Brian said. It was our intent to do the same thing and have big backyards in these like those. Those were, when you built a duplex, you had to have 7,500 square feet for a duplex lot. So they were 30 feet wide, and you had a big backyard to get to that 7,500 square feet for both of them. The codes have changed. Now I think you just need 20 feet frontage for a duplex lot, or excuse me, for a townhouse lot. But Brian mentioned that this could be a better way with getting the one-way, which we are planning on doing, and the extra 4 spaces of parking on that shared maintenance agreement area. And then you also have the 4 parallel parking on Pine Street. So really, there's a realistic way of getting 8 different visitor parking spaces, not only for the people here, but the people that live across the street or down the street, because there's a lot of cars and apartments and other residents on the Pine Street. When we had our neighborhood meeting, the property owner to the south was the only one that showed up, and she didn't have a problem. I'm not trying to put words in her mouth with us developing the property. She just requested a fence on our southern line, and we said yes, that would be one of the first things we do, so that we didn't take away her privacy or have people in her backyard with access of looking in the backyard. So if and when this gets approved and we start construction of underground on the site, we would be putting up a chain link fence with slats in it to keep their privacy as much as possible. We did like that we were able to get a space in there for street trees, because everybody in town, I think, likes trees. So it's nice that we'll have some green space there for the trees in that 2 spots next on either side of the parallel parking and by the city sidewalk on that side. As Brian mentioned about the storm water retention, yes, like every house in Canby, you have to take care of your own water on your own property. So all the roof drains will go to the backyard to not a dry well, but a seepage trench like we do on the bigger lots. They fit in this 20-foot area. They're underground. They work great. We haven't had them back up. It's just it's a nice system that takes care of that water. For the runoff on the sidewalks, the one-way, the driveways, there is a dry well that's on lot number 2. If Brian goes back to one of the drawings, you can see it there, and the whole one-way area drains towards that. So lot 1 would drain back towards 1, 2. The way it's graded and paved, when he gets to it, there's 2 circles. It's the bigger one that's on lot 2.
That right there?
Yeah. That's a dry well there to catch all the rainwater that hits the concrete grass area if it runs off the sidewalk, the 4 extra parking spaces, so that there isn't runoff onto Pine Street. So that dry well will take care of that area there. And the pervious pavers on lots 2 and 5 are because of the coverage of the lots. So yes, we've done that in the past in the Garden Crossing subdivision on North Redwood, that a couple of areas had the concrete pavers with grass growing in between, and you can park on them, but it gets rid of the water right there, so it's not covered up, and you have more green grass area there. The fire hydrant there's 2 fire hydrants. one on both sides of South Pine Street. The one on the east side of South Pine Street is up the road and across the driveway to get into the, if that's still the Royal Ascot Apartments. So that, I would think, is maybe 150 feet away. There's one across the subdivision on South Pine and about 50 feet up. So we haven't talked to the fire marshal about sprinklering the subdivision, but there is a fire hydrant that's across the street and at the most 50 feet across from lot number 1. And being that I've built the 5 different duplexes on the street, you know, a question always comes up of what are these going to look like? Well, if you sell something, it can't look bad. It has to look fairly nice and match either the subdivision around it or the houses around it, or even better. Well, we try to make things sellable and look nice for everybody in the area. So yes, there are 2 threeplexes, but they are on individual lots. And like Brian said, the lot goes from the property line back to the property line. And the reason we did this was so that we can have that shared maintenance agreement and have these saleable lots instead of like a condo and have them all connected as one, a condo subdivision. But these can all be saleable lots in the R2 zone, and they could own their individual lots, 1 through 5.
Any questions?
So you weren't, you said you were not going to sprinkler them?
We haven't even discussed that with the fire marshal.
And Brian, was the fire marshal requiring that or just was asking?
No, he's just asking. He wanted to know how, whether they were or not.
Probably with the common wall like that, they don't want fires to spread, so sprinkler's probably a good idea. Okay, that's all I had.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak in favor of this project? Now I will go back to my mystery cards here. So Marissa Ibarra, is that correct? They left?
Left.
So Regina, you have their time and Robert's time. If you'll state your name and address for the record, that would be fantastic. Oh, well, I experienced that just 2 weeks ago. My ear is still worn out.
This one should go pretty fast, actually.
Okay, well, okay.
All right. My name is Regina Taylor. I live at 173 Southwest 6th Avenue in Canby. The handouts that I gave to you, there's 3 of them. I broke it up into 3 units in case I didn't have enough time. It helped me prioritize. I'm going to start with the top one there that has the colored picture of the site plat. My primary concern about the subdivision is the violation of the 2 city ordinances that say that townhouses can't have more than 2 linked units. That's a big enough part of my testimony. I'm actually going to put that at the back. I'm going to go through some other easy stuff first, and then I'll hit that one. Going to the subdivision design standards, we have a municipal code 1664-040A that says size and shape, says the depth of any lot or parcel shall not exceed 3 times its width. These lots are 4 to 6 times as long as they are wide, even if we fudge the numbers and subtract that 39.5-foot wide street right away, all 6 lots are still in violation. That middle part there is just to show how I got my numbers. Going to the bottom of this page, linear design to be avoided, Canby Municipal Code 1662-020, subdivision application standards and criteria. Says applications for subdivisions shall be evaluated upon the following standards and criteria. Subsection C5 says the arrangement of clustered dwellings shall be designed to avoid the linear development patterns. This applicant is proposing all shotgun designs, the linear ones. On the next page, calculation density. The R2 zone requires a minimum of 14 units per buildable acre. The applicant calculated and determined the required density for this parcel is 5.85 units, which he rounded up to 6, but the applicant did not follow the published calculation method for R2, which requires subtracting the buildable area of the unbuildable area of the internal street right-of-way. After subtracting the applicant's private street right-of-way, the correct number of units required to satisfy 14 units per acre is only 4.8, rounded up to 5. An example of how the applicant might satisfy the true density requirement of 5 units is build one single-family home and two-unit townhouses instead of cramming in 6 units. Infill standards. The applicant states this property is not subject to infill standards. However, Canby Municipal Code 1664040J applies to subdivisions built adjacent to existing developments or where the parent parcel is less than 2 acres in size prior to subdividing, and both these conditions exist at Pine Place subdivision. The Planning Commission may require infill standards at their discretion. The infill standards promote compatibility between new and existing homes. I put the copy of the ordinance there. There are 2 applicable infill standards the Planning Commission might want to consider requiring the applicant to apply just to the proposed dwelling that's against the one-story neighbor at 1222 South Township Road. One would be the maximum building height of 28 feet, and the second is a step-up standard, which I've provided there for you. I don't think any of the other infill standards apply to this. It looks, they're doing fine otherwise. The next page. Width of the access to Pine Street. The applicant is providing 15-foot egress access where the property intersects with Pine Street, but 20 feet are required for a 3 to 19 unit development, and I put a copy of the chart there where you can see it says 20 feet. The minimum, this one's very tiny, but I'm going to put it in there. Minimum dimension standard for parking. The lots with 19-foot long driveways are deficient by 1 foot because the table requires 1610-070 requires a minimum of 20 feet, but the applicant has used the whole 5-foot sidewalk there in front of the house as part of the parking calculations. Actually, that one foot, I guess, could be in that sidewalk. I did have a little concern that there's 3 different sizes listed to this property in the staff report. Staff states the property is 0.38 acres. The applicant says it's 0.42 acres. First American Title says it's 0.42 acres. Pacific Survey says it's 0.46 acres. I don't think I need to worry about that, but I thought it was odd. The next one, the parking and safety concerns, they've already addressed. They said that's going to be one way. Good deal. The off-street parking, 4 parking spots is good. I thought it was interesting, the applicant's narrative says there's 6 of them. I only found 4, and 4 is fine, but he says there's 6. There's no provision for clustered garbage or mail. The subdivision application packet requires applicants to provide a layout of all proposed structures, including buildings, fences, signs, garbage, mailboxes, exterior storage area, exterior mechanical and utility equipment. He probably has room to put that in there, but he should do so. And he's already handled the fire hydrant one, so we'll skip that. If we go to my next handout, the one that has the single box at the top, starts out with the words, "I'm starting my testimony with City Ordinance 1200." Our ordinances are the general and permanent law of the City of Canby. We use our land use ordinances to help guide the development in Canby. We may not like them, we must obey the ordinances. They help maintain order and harmony in our society. I even read an ordinance that troubled me. It said that I can break the law just by sitting still and doing nothing. It says, "Whenever in the ordinances of the city any act or omission is made unlawful, it shall include causing, allowing, permitting, citing, abetting, suffering, or concealing the fact of the omission." That's Canby Municipal Code 1-04060. Prohibited acts include causing and permitting. So I have the responsibility to speak up and not just sit and allow or permit or conceal the fact when I suspect an ordinance is being broken. Pine Place subdivision is the second application the Commission has reviewed this month that attempts to violate the following ordinance. 1604190. A single-family dwelling means a detached building containing 1 dwelling unit. Attached or common wall single-family dwellings may also exist, provided that each is situated on a separate lot, and provided that each such unit shall not contain a common wall with more than one other dwelling unit. We should also look at 1664-04 or 040G, subdivision design standards for lots, building lot lines. Because the common wall between two townhouses is built at the location where their property lines meet, this ordinance tells us that we need to mark the plats or deeds to show the location of that shared wall and clarify why there's no side yard there. I quote subsection G of the ordinance. G, building lines. A special building setback lines are also, if special building setback lines are also established in the subdivision plat, they shall be shown on the subdivision plat or included in the deed restrictions. This includes lots where common wall construction is to be permitted between two single-family dwellings. I have no power to enforce the ordinances, but I can bring them to the attention of the commissioners for their scrutiny. Commissioners have the power and authority to enforce our ordinances. Canby Municipal Code 606120D states, except as otherwise permitted by law, it shall be the duty of the commission, and it shall have the power to do and perform all other acts and things necessary or proper to carry out the provisions of the city ordinances. I believe it's necessary for the commission to reject this land use application for townhouses until such time changes are made and the application begins to comply with our land use ordinances. This may require a change to the application or a change to the ordinances, or maybe both. I'm not trying to prevent or delay the development of the land. Any applicant that desires to connect 3 or more units will find they are allowed to do so in the ordinances that apply to multifamily developments, Canby Municipal Code 1620, or condominiums, Canby Municipal Code 1678, to expedite the development. To the point, our ordinances are laws that control, protect, and maintain harmony in our society. Allowing or permitting an ordinance to be broken is unlawful. Viable solutions already exist for building 3-unit buildings. There's no need to violate the ordinances. I provided a chart that I made to explain what I'm talking about. The difference, or I think the stepping point, is the subdivided lots. If you divided it into 2 lots, you could put the 3 units on each one, but there's different requirements for that type of development, and he hasn't followed those. My last handout. And this document contains my own argument to retain the 2-unit limit on townhouses in Canby. You're not going to find a list of ordinances in this document. I'm just providing my thoughts and experience on townhouses, hoping you will take them into consideration when reviewing land use applications that are requesting to build lines of connected townhouses exceeding 2 units. And I put the ordinance there again. I believe townhouses serve a need. I believe Canby can benefit from some of them, but I find a definite benefit to restricting the number of linked units to 2. One is a small town feel. Canby Municipal Code 1604190 is a powerful instrument to help us hold on to the small town feel that Canby citizens crave: spaciousness, quiet living, privacy, and space. The simplicity of the ordinance is that it allows only end-unit townhouses. It is impossible to have a middle-unit townhouse if only 2 units can be connected. End units usually have more windows and light and views. They're less boxed in than middle units. End units experience less noise through the walls. They only have a neighbor on one side. End units enjoy more privacy and space in the yard, and they have a side yard, so there's more yard. I want to share some jargon. When I was employed in the insurance industry, I heard the mnemonic, or memory device, or jargon, that helped jumpstart the thought processes when evaluating risks. When discussing townhouses, the jargon we used was buckets, blight, and banks. This helped triage or prioritize our concerns and ultimately to understand, control, and correctly provide coverage for insurance risks. Refer to my imaginary 33-unit townhouse picture here when I go through my next illustrations. Buckets is a reminder that the middle units have different risks and costs than end units. The lack of the side yard complicates restoring a middle unit. Consider a kitchen fire in the rear area of a middle unit. All debris and restoration material must enter or exit through the front door, often in 5-gallon buckets. It's a slow, labor-intensive, and more costly to repair an end unit more costly to repair than an end unit because they have the benefit of the side yard. Lacking a side yard is not only inconvenient, it can be hazardous. Most townhouses have fenced backyards, and if there's an alley, a gate to the alley. The fenced rear yard of a middle unit lacking an alley is a dead-end trap for anyone trying to escape a burning home or a burglar, unless they have the physical ability to scale fences. Maybe they will be in luck and can find something to climb on to get over the fence, like a bucket maybe. Blight. Those closed-off rear yards and middle units also aggravates simple routine tasks, general maintenance, repairs, and remodeling, since all supplies must be hauled in through the front door and through the house. A simple common task like mowing the backyard or picking up after your dog requires hauling the lawnmower to the backyard or the doggy doo to the garbage can in the front yard through the entire house. I pity the middle unit owner when the sewer tech delivers the news that they need to get a rooter machine into the backyard to repair a broken sewer pipe back there. Or that backyard barbecue fire that escalates because the firemen took longer to string the fire hose through the house to put the fire out. This phenomenon of middle units may help explain why they have a lower resale value than end units. You get the idea. Blight. It is unfortunate, but many townhouses lack a comprehensive homeowners agreement to help control the process and distribution of costs associated with inevitable high-level maintenance issues like replacing a shared roof. If a solid comprehensive HOA agreement is not established when the units were built, it's doubtful the owners will enjoy harmonious collaboration to create one once the roof starts leaking. This situation becomes more complicated by the number of linked units. The counterpart of a townhouse is called a multifamily dwelling. Connecting 3 or more units is better suited as a multifamily dwelling than a townhouse. Multifamily dwellings can have the same appearance as a long type of townhouses or even stacked like apartments, but the difference is there is only one lot, one deed, and one owner or set of owners, which simplifies the upkeep of the property. The common areas, plus any yards or multi-unit dwellings that are not individually fenced, are maintained by the owner. These differences make multifamily dwellings more potentially better fit for the community than long rows of 3 or more townhouses. Banks is the last jargon word. Mortgagees for townhouses covet a comprehensive homeowners agreement to help assure the loan will be repaid. Consider the townhouse owner lacking a solid HOA, faced with unsuccessful attempts at negotiating major shared expenses with other owners of the townhouses in his complex. In exasperation and frustration, the townhouse owner stops making payments on their mortgage or perhaps files an insurance claim to pull in the banks and insurance companies to help figure it out. In our example diagram with 33 townhouses, consider the problems if there is no adequate HOA and a major shared expense looms, like maybe repaving the common street, where potentially there could be 33 owners, 33 insurance companies, and 33 banks all attempting to resolve an issue. While there's little the city of Canby can do to prevent that scenario, we can help control the severity of some situations by continuing to enforce the ordinance that limits the number of linked townhouses to 2. Banks. A potentially bothersome issue is earthquake and flood insurance, which some lenders require, but some insurance companies won't provide unless all the linked units attain. This will occasionally make a difference to obtaining a mortgage like VA or other organizations. This situation becomes more complicated with the number of linked units. And I'm assuming we're trying to sell these things and make Canby a friendly place, so I threw that in there. Banks. Purchasing a townhouse unit creates a precarious financial association with the other unit owners who are probably strangers. You've heard the saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, which can be applied to this situation. Canby can help control this by continuing to enforce the ordinance that limits the number of linked townhouses to 2. The financial association with strangers increases as the number of linked units increases, but the attractiveness of owning the townhouses decreases with the number of linked units. Banks and insurance companies are also leery of housing developments built en masse, that is, built as one project, using bulk purchasing power or building supplies and utilizing a sole developer to erect the entire subdivision. En masse development is typical for townhouses that are linked in long lines, 4 or more units. Although rare, defective materials or construction practices could contaminate every unit in such a development. Canby can help control the situation by continuing to enforce the ordinance that limits the number of linked townhouse units to 2. Developers of 2-unit townhouses are far more likely to showcase their construction abilities by using a variety of styles, materials, and upgrades to attract a variety of buyers. This variety is a slight safeguard against mass defects. The impact on developers. Developers will be quick to grumble that a 2-unit limit on townhouses will force them to raise the price of townhomes that they do build. So what would entice a consumer to pay more for a townhouse? The developer can offer higher quality building materials, craftsmanship, a great homeowners agreement, location, amenities, a sense of privacy and safety, a quality neighborhood. Some developers will moan because they are accustomed to more leniencies in the land use process and will lament the days when they did build townhouses where 3 or more linked units were built. And yes, Canby does have some of these. Progress, the increase in Canby's population, or change in any element of life causes us to constantly reassess our current status, our resources, our needs, our focus, and our outlook to the future. Canby has progressed and matured to the point where it has become necessary to fully enforce our ordinances, including this one that limits the number of townhouses that can be linked to 2. That's it.
Any questions?
No.
Thank you. Are there any other people that would like, any other persons that would like to speak in opposition? Okay. Would you like some rebuttal time? You have to say your name and address again.
Ed Netter, 1847 South First Street, Canby, Oregon. When we were designing this subdivision, we have 8 or 10, possibly 12 different scenarios. We have one that fits with 8 units in here, like a clover leaf, 2 different, they're all duplexes. It fits in there. We didn't think it was as desirable as 6 lots because it gives more area, more parking than, because we get the 4 extra spots. But yes, we have a plan that we could have wanted to put 8 units, but we decided to apply for 6. Where she mentioned the 6 parking spaces and now it's down to 4, that was when they were at an angle and we found out there wasn't as much room for backing out of the driveways. That's why we put them at parallel to make them, it took it down to 4 units for parking. The different sizes of the lot is because some of them count to the middle of the road, but it really goes back and we lose footage there. So it ends up being 130 feet by 130 feet. We lost 20 feet of the road that is, before we had to dedicate the land for the road, it was 150 by 130. So that's why it was a bunch of different sizes from what everybody had in there. I myself personally have built in 3 different subdivisions. One that has a 3-plex townhouse unit, that's in Garden Crossing on North Redwood. One that's on South Ivy, which is called Ivy Garden Subdivision, that's a 5-plex in there. And then on Valentine Meadows, which is Northwest 3rd, which is the road that goes down to the police station, there's a subdivision there that has 2 4-plexes, a duplex, and a 6-plex that I've built all in the last 15 years. So I don't see there's a problem continuing to build the more than 2 connected units. Kind of like the driveway access agreement, there's also, whether it's a duplex, a 3-plex, 5 or 6-plex, there's still a party wall maintenance agreement that if there is a problem on one side, there's an agreement that they can access the neighbor's property and work on that wall if something happens. So there's ways, I mean, that party wall agreement is ways that if there's something happens on one unit or it affects the other unit, they can get in there and fix both units. But yeah, to summarize up, I think we made our proposing to make a nice subdivision on a empty lot that's been empty for many years. There was a mobile home on it that we took down because it was in very bad shape, probably about 10 years ago, and then now have come up with this plan and think it will make the community and the neighborhood look even better than what it is now. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Netter?
Were you guys aware of that municipal code 16-04-190? Brian?
Staff was aware of it, yes. I can talk about that some.
How do we get around that?
We can talk about it in discussion after you're done with his rebuttal.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks.
No more questions? I will close public testimony, and now you can ask your questions, Ari.
How do we get around municipal code 16-.04.190?
So staff wasn't aware of this provision immediately during pre-apps, when not only this development, but as Regina indicated, the Canby Townhome project. I forget which one actually started now, because this one's been in the works for quite a while, as well as we've gone through various versions that we were trying to get something we thought was acceptable. When staff discovered we had numerous discussions in-house about this ordinance provision, and it was one of the most difficult decisions, probably the most difficult decision I've had since I've been planning director here, whether to move forward or not. Because our consensus was, no, it's pretty straightforward what it says, and it didn't seem like a reasonable wording. And so what we did is we did just what Ed Netter had just indicated and Regina indicated, is we looked around the community for the past 15 and 20 years, and apparently previous planning directors weren't aware of this provision, or they ignored it as not being suitable. And one of the reasons that it lent itself to inappropriate language and was limiting is that usually it's in the high R2 zone district that you find these type of things. And being able to redevelop properties because of the lot sizes and such, you need to redevelopment as a minimum density of 14 units per acre. And it's oftentimes difficult to do that, and you need the freedom to utilize unique housing solutions. And that is the number one issue that's all around now, is how do we provide more affordable housing? How do we provide this mix of unique developments that aren't the standard platted, detached, single-family, low-density lot arrangements, so that we can move ourselves towards this other market that there's a need for. So we chose to continue the pattern that had been set and can be, as allowing these uses even because of the ordinance provision that we saw there, recognizing that as soon as we could get to it, we would change it, and it would take 1 or 2 words to simply delete per lot. And then you could have as many attached units as you like. Saying that, that's why it was a difficult decision. I've never had to say I'm not going to follow what, there's always gray areas in how ordinances are applied and such. But I pretty much got everyone to say, no, that seems to be limiting it to only one common wall, meaning you could never have more than basically a duplex. So why did they call it single-family detached with common walls? Well, maybe because maybe the intent really was no more than one common wall, which are duplexes, and that townhomes aren't allowed in Canby. And so that was the difficulty that I was having, is to think that we'd built all of these townhomes in Canby for 20 years, and yet the ordinance didn't allow that all of that time. And I've now discovered that, hey, it's not allowed. And I called the applicant of Canby Townhomes and told them, it appears that this ordinance doesn't really prohibit this. Apparently, the practice in Canby for consistency has always been to allow it. And I told them, this could come up in the review of your application. Regina brought it up. And it is an ordinance requirement. As I read it, one common wall. And so these kind of developments wouldn't be allowed if you're going to follow to the T what that code says today. I can go through a couple other things that Regina's mentioned here. I didn't try to do the calculation myself, but that the lot length and widths, yeah, these are kind of long and skinny lots. But again, that's a guideline. That's something, it's a reason if you feel like it's appropriate that you can deny a development based upon that, but it's a guideline. Generally, when you start getting long, skinny lots, they're usually thinking of detached single-family homes. They're not thinking of the unusual, different, alternative type housing arrangements that this has, and it doesn't apply well when you're applying it to these kind of developments. And I'm quite certain that that's where the provision came from, was the typical detached single-family home lots. They get kind of odd trying to find a house plan that works. But when you've got attached common walls, it's not difficult at all, and the long, skinny lots don't seem to have a bearing. They're not really a problem. In fact, the ordinance becomes the problem in order to provide the housing. So I just wanted to emphasize that's why I made the choice, because standard consistency through Canby, no one has followed this ordinance provision in the past. Doesn't seem reasonable because it doesn't allow townhomes in Canby. And that's a very important thing, and there's actually state law now that is demanding that we do code audits and make absolutely certain we do allow those. And so that's why I made that choice.
Brian, what would it take to change that?
Well, it's like I said, it's a two-word text amendment. But the process to do text amendments is 35 notice to DLCD. It's putting those out, doing the advertisements. It's a 4-month process. And we haven't had time to even get these applications and our reports done to try to put something like that in place when I discovered this with this application and the Canby Townhome application. We haven't had time to breathe to try to do a text amendment.
You're breathing. You're doing fine. You're doing
Barely.
fine. You're doing fine, Brian. Anything else?
Yeah, she mentioned the 4.8 units might be more appropriate if you were to exclude the driveway. I believe it does talk about excluding streets and such, but that's for a minimum. The applicant is supposed to have 6 dwelling units minimum for the entire lot. If he was to exclude that, yes, it would be fewer, but he has the ability to go all the way up to an infinite amount of units if he can fit landscape requirements and parking requirements on the site. So I don't think that's really relevant because it's a minimum that we're trying to meet. 4.8 may be the minimum if you exclude the common shared driveway. But he can go as high as he wants, that he can fit and still meet the other requirements. Regina mentioned the infill standards, and the code's pretty clear. In fact, we amended it in about 2010. One of our developers in town does many infill projects, and he was successful in doing away with the infill standards as they apply to R2 lots unless they're adjacent to an R1 lot. Well, that's what the ordinance used to be. And now, all R2 projects are excluded from complying with the infill standards in order to increase their ability to redevelop property and not be bound by various step-up height standards, et cetera, that would make it almost impossible to meet the minimum density standard on those R2 lots that become available. You would have to do a lot of aggregation of unwilling property owners to get lots big enough so you could make a good R2 development if you also had to comply with all of the infill standards. So we changed the ordinance in 2010 so it didn't apply to R2 zoning. It would be a nice thing for developers to think about for compatibility, because you still may have single-family homes on adjacent R2 zone property and such. But we specifically did away with the requirement on the R2. The length of the parking spaces, we talk about that all of the time. We've had several people point out that in Canby, maybe it was somebody even on this commission, probably 1/3 to half of all of the vehicles in Canby are pickup trucks.
Yeah, Tyler's not here tonight, so.
And they're too long to fit in. Our standard practice, and I've talked to people that have been here much longer, has always been, we need 19 feet from a garage door to the beginning of a sidewalk to make sure that every car that parks outside of their garage isn't violating city ordinance by parking over a sidewalk. In this particular case, we feel like you can let that pass because it's a private sidewalk. It's not a public sidewalk. If they want to block their own sidewalk, I guess they can do that. But you're not going to get parking for pickups because you probably need a 22-foot long parking space if you're going to be parking the pickups on some of these things. And as she said, they can take up one foot of the private sidewalk that they're providing here. I'm not 100% sure why they are doing that, but I think it's preferable that they have that sidewalk than not, so people can walk between the units somewhat in a sidewalk area rather than out in the private one-way drive on a private setting like this. I think that probably improves things. She was okay with the parking ratio, which I thought we were as well. No, other than that, I'd like to applaud Regina in the indication of why we might want to consider keeping the ordinance as it is. Just incredible reasoning that went into that discussion. I don't know how many of you guys have also thought about townhomes, and it's the end units that you always think as being the more desirable. Extra windows, you have the extra ability to get in and around and that type of thing. And consequently, you have a variety of housing, costs within one development because of that, because you are going to have less expensive units that are internal. It's just another form of housing type. And in our way of thinking at this point, we need to be moving to anything we can to provide the greatest variety of housing types and opportunities, because everybody has a willingness and desire to occupy different kinds of housing that's suitable to them and suitable to meet their price point, et cetera. So I don't know that I can give you any more guidance on that. It's how you feel about my argument of consistency in Canby. Is it time? Have things changed enough in 20 years that we should, to the T, follow the code today? and we can certainly do that, and I have no problem in us making that decision to do that.
So as a point of clarification from me, the 16.64.040, did I hear you say that that is in conflict with a state directive?
In some ways, yes, because if we have an ordinance that doesn't allow anywhere in any zone district in Canby to do some of these other types of housing, very common housing types, such as townhomes, then I would believe that we are. And that we need to amend our code right away, and that's what staff had planned to do as soon as we could get around to that when we discovered this, because it wasn't until these two applications that I was even aware of that reading of that provision. I'd never really had to read it because we'd never had an application since I was here for an attached unit.
Any questions for Brian? Okay, any thoughts on this?
Well, I don't think it's any secret that I don't love big, huge developments. If I had my druthers, we'd all have 1 acre lots and drive the big pickup trucks and hang out on the front porch drinking lemonade or iced tea. But obviously we have all sorts of different kinds of people that need different sorts of housing, and I think that if we really look at this, I think they've done a good job putting it together. I'd have a hard time saying no to it, being that we've been allowing it for so long already. So I think it looks good. I think if there's anywhere in Canby that something like this is going to fit, it's in this place, in this spot right here, where it's already surrounded by duplex townhomes and multifamily apartments, and I just did a Google Map overview, and behind there is a parking lot, and behind that parking lot is another parking lot and some commercial buildings, and I think it fits there better than it would fit almost anywhere else in town. So I don't have a problem with it.
All right.
I don't have a problem with the development. The three units together. I think it's a pretty good one. Actually, when I first looked at it, I thought it was good. I think it's up to the consumer to decide if they want to buy a middle townhouse or not. But I sit here twice a month and hear complaints by people in the audience that we're allowing all of this construction when the traffic's bad and when there's no parking, although there is plenty in this. And our reasoning behind approving all of these developments and decisions is we're following the code, whether we like it or not. And I didn't know this when I came in here tonight. And I have a problem with that. That's usually my defense for a lot of my decisions when I don't really approve of a lot of it. I mean, I approve of the building. I don't really like the growth. I do approve of this development. I think you need to change the damn code. And we've been talking about this. We've had a lot of problems with some of this code. We talked about how many years old it is. Well, here's an example right here where our code's not keeping up with what the city council and the planning department thinks is right. So I say change it, and I will vote no.
Yeah, I have to give kudos to Regina for all the research. I mean, thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Mr. Netter, I think, did an awesome job. I think it's the right intent. I think the parking, for once, I'm a big parking person, and I think this fits. I think this allows people to put their trash out. I think it allows people to actually get away from the street and be able to have the kids roll a ball into the street and not have to get hit, right? So I think it hits those safety concerns. So I do think, you know, the intent, I understand the lot sizes and the changes to that, but if you really look at the buildable space from the lot and the shared space that they're doing, I think it does kind of fit into that. So I'm okay with the 1664,040, because I think the intent is right for this construction. I think it meets the trees and is a good development for Canby. I think we do need to have townhomes. People do like the center ones because they're cheaper. You gotta have the housing for folks to move in here. They all can't be. I understand, I feel your pain, but they can't all afford those big 1 acre lots with big trucks. So you gotta have those. And I do think it meets a need. I think it's in, you know, from a density standpoint, I think it meets that as well. I read the same code that it's a minimum. This is in a high dense area, so it meets the area for that too. And I like the fact that those parking lots are behind there. I don't like the fact that we have a code there that states this, so I feel bad about that as well. Is there any way we can make an amendment that it gets changed? I mean,
Well, I think that we can direct the planning department to put this change, yeah, get the wheels going on that right away. I'm with you, Derek. I think that our city code is in conflict with a state code, or the directive from the state, from what I understand. I do think it's a good development for that particular space, although I'm with Larry. I'm you know, if the code says one thing, I'm generally like to follow what's written down on paper for what we have in terms of code. But when you're in conflict with, I can only see problems coming up if between the city and the state, state always seems to supersede city code. I'll be voting in favor. So can I have a motion? Sean?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve. Let me find the number here. SUB 18-03 Pine Place subdivision.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Good. Okay. We will move along to our Hope Village. Okay. Let's see, get my little cheat sheet here. Okay, we will now consider a request from Marquee Companies for a conditional use permit and planned unit development modification to expand a memory care addition to their existing Marquee Hope Village Assisted Living and Post-Hospital Care Facility at 1577 South Ivy Street, CUP 18-04/PUD 18-02. The matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested parties in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out the public testimony card and give to the recording secretary. At the appropriate time, when your name is called, please step forward to the microphone, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each, the opponents will be given 5 minutes each, and those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become a part of the record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with the previous testimony. This time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest to please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter.
My wife works for Marquis.
You
As a
intend,
caregiver, I intend to participate.
okay. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. I assume the same thing applies. Okay. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? Okay. Public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, Brian will give a staff report, then questions by us. Then I will open the public hearing for testimony. The applicant will have 15 minutes. Proponents not more than 5 minutes each. Opponents not more than 5 minutes each. And those thought to be neutral, not more than 5 minutes each, and rebuttal by the applicant if necessary for not more than 10 minutes. That time I will close public testimony. We'll have questions, if any, by us, and then we will discuss and deliberate the issue. No more testimony will be allowed unless allowed by me. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Any questions? Okay. Can we have some testimony from the applicant?
You'll let staff give you.
Oh, staff, I'm
just
sorry.
a general overview.
You know,
for-
it's just kind of getting on to be that time,
You're looking at the clock.
and not really. But yes, yes, Brian.
Okay, so we have a modification to the Marquis Center, which is a portion of the Hope Village campus. This is to accommodate a new memory care wing to the assisted living facility that's out there now. They are to be connected, so we think of it as an addition. It's 13,449 square feet. It's a one-story building. It's located on the south side of the current assisted living facility, and it's adjacent to a access road off of South Ivy that is a right-in or in only. So it's a one-way drive, and that drive is being slightly relocated further south that actually aligns it better with 16th Avenue across Ivy, which is a two-way street on the other side. That reconfiguration changes some existing parking that's on the site. That parking is shown in this existing condition map, which is right here. This is what exists today. Here's the assisted living facility, Marquee Center, and the addition connects here and comes out into this area. And they reconfigure the driveway further south to come through here, and then they add some additional parking, generally over in this area. And they come out with 20 additional parking spaces over what they're removing. So the reconfiguration does result in the required additional parking that the new square footage addition would need, which is based upon, it's basically an Alzheimer's and other memory issues, and so most of those people certainly don't drive, and so the standard is 1 parking space for 2 beds, and then you're supposed to account for the employee parking as well. And so they've done that in their narrative and indicated those parking spots. So this is their site plan showing the modification area and how it ties into the existing building. And so the yellow area is the new proposed 1-story building. There's all sorts of things indicated on here. It's too small for us to read all of the indications, but one thing that staff and I think the applicant did some pretty good evaluation, trying to give an indication that with the reconfiguration of this drive, where there was parking in here, moving that parking down to double loaded in this area, adding a string of parking in this area, and over here is where they picked up their other 20 parking spaces. They did remove some grass area that was in these areas, but most of it was relocating the paving that was already in this area, come out in this area. So we do not think there was too much of a decrease in landscaping, and the entire site had 42% of the land area was landscaped before. So staff did not try in ourselves to calculate what the final resulting landscape percentage is. I think they actually provided that up here, and it's still way above the minimum that's required for a PUD and in a campus-type setting like this. The people that come in this one-way drive, because it's one-way, it's narrower than you would find in a normal drive, which is a good thing because you want to discourage people from going the wrong way. So I don't know, the angle of the parking spaces helps people know that they're not coming in this way just because they'll see those angled parkings. They may need to erect some sort of internal signage here too to help make sure that people don't actually accidentally try to drive the wrong way. You see the entrance, the proposed entryway at this location, and they have their tied-in walking path all through this facility. You can see that walking path going through down here. You see all the connections with the sidewalks internally going around the entire campus area. And you can make a whole loop around and come around the building. And so that continues. So really the reconfiguration of the drive and the parking was the only real impact they had by making this addition. And we all know how everything we read about the baby boomers and more of us are getting older and we're going to need more of these kind of facilities. And so there's no doubt about that. And I'm sure that it's a needed provision. See if there was a couple other things. In the a couple of things that we had a discussion about is we have our outdoor lighting standard, and the architect working on this project indicated that they have 2 pole-mounted lights that were in this parking lot that they're trying to reuse if possible. Well, we have new regulations, and so there's a possibility that those fixtures on top of those poles do not fully meet the light trespass requirements when placed in this new parking area or near the side of it, near the property boundary. We don't know for sure, but the applicant's aware of that, and if necessary, they may have to go with a different pole and light fixture. They seem to be a combo. It's hard to do a different light fixture on it that might have additional shielding. The way our lighting code, the most important provision in it is to prohibit light trespass across the property line. And you do that by measuring at a 0.3 foot above at the property line, where you look up at the light source, and you shouldn't be able to see the fixture or the light bulb itself, because it's shielded to prevent not all light from trespassing onto a neighbor property, but the glare of the light that you might notice from an adjacent property. And so we're hoping that they can evaluate that and see whether they can reuse those or not, and if necessary, I think we're still recommending that they change, even though the light fixture and pole may not fully match the existing ones they have on the campus. But since they're reconfiguring and moving things, we think they should try to address our lighting standards. They indicated, and you can see on the site plan, I did not actually review this particular one, but there is a statement in our plan, something about they didn't propose any signage. Well, they are proposing a monument sign right here near that entrance way. And it's not designed at this time. It's just a location that's picked. We don't see any problem whatsoever in the location that they're proposed. They understand they'll have to go through the normal sign permitting process to make sure the monument sign itself meets the city code size standards. Since it's an internal private drive and such, there's no street intersection or sight distance problems in this particular location, so it should be just fine. The third issue that came up just today is that when they reconfigure this drive further south, they're getting really close to this property line. And by looking at Google Map and such, the architect has indicated that there's either or both a street light pole and or a possible power pole right at this corner. And it's not going to interfere with the drive itself, but it might actually, one or more of them might actually interfere with the condition of approval to provide new ADA accessible ramps from the sidewalk to this drive, since it's being moved and reconfigured. And so we really need to have those ADA ramps. It's probably only a problem on the southern one as it heads towards that adjacent property line to the south. What I've said at this point is that those, because we didn't have time to go look at this issue and discuss it with the public works staff and such today when it came up, is that we look at those kind of things on the construction drawings at the pre-construction meeting. And the condition does say that they need to try to meet the ADA requirements. A street light can be moved. I'm sure of that if there's a problem in the ADA ramp. The power pole may be a more difficult thing if it actually is in the way, because we don't know what it's holding up. If it's high voltage lines all up and down South Ivy, that could be a really expensive proposition to try to move that pole. So we'll just have to see what we can do to deal with that issue. I'm not sure you're going to be able to solve that issue here, but wanted you to be aware of that. They've got the elevation showing this particular one is the south elevation facing that drive, private drive is the one-way drive that comes in. That's what you'll see, and here's the entranceway. And you see how back behind it is the existing two-story assisted living facility. So as you get closer to the adjacent property, that reportedly will be developed by Hope Village in some manner, they will have this nice look here from that south property as it's developing. Then you've got your other elevations shown to the west internally, to the east to Ivy Street over here. This is what you'll see. And back over here on the far corner is one location where they're talking about potential emergency generator being placed in case the lights ever go out, I guess. Because I think it's pretty critical that they keep the electricity going in a place like this. And then this is internal to the north of the existing building where there's a gap between them except where they connect. So we do have one of the conditions of approval talks about the interior private street shall be designed to city local street structural standards. We find actually what the ordinance says is that all public and private streets shall be constructed to city standards. When we say city standards, the code doesn't tell us what it means by that. We've always interpreted that to mean the structural thickness because it's a private street. It doesn't have to have right-of-way. If it's a one-way street, it doesn't have need the normal width. We're talking about trying to build quality private roads that don't fall apart within the first year by trying to follow similar standards that city uses for a local street. And our actual standards for a local street are 4 inches of asphalt in 2 lifts over 12 inches of base rock. And so when we say to city standard, that's really what we're thinking they should try to do for the new portion of the relocated drive that's internal. Still, another gray area, is that a driveway or is that a street? And so we're thinking that it's kind of an interior street for their use. And so we think it should meet a similar standard as our local streets for the structural integrity that they build that to. And they'll probably have trucks and things, trash trucks. They have on their site plan, they have a trash dumpster located right here. It's going to be screened. So they're going to be coming in this road and either doing their front lift. I'm not sure how our Canby's trash trucks do their thing now. So they're going to need a good pavement section in here just to safely accommodate those trash trucks. There's some existing arborvitae apparently along that southern property boundary, and so I think they're trying to retain those. That might help with the light pollution. Those existing poles, I'm not sure how tall those are. They might be able to utilize those. They're just going to have to check those out. We have a few other conditions of approval. There's actually 9 in the staff report, but I'm not going to, most of those are just procedural conditions of approval. They've got their bike racks near the entrance area. And we already talked about the condition about the ADA ramps. So I think I'll just close my presentation at this point, see if there's any questions.
Any questions for Brian? Okay. Do we have a proponent that would like to speak? If you'll step forward with your name and address.
Drew Cornetti. I'm with CB2 Architects of Salem. Address is 500 Liberty Street Southeast, 97301. I'm speaking on behalf of Marquis, and I think that Brian did a good job of outlining the project. I'm not sure we even necessarily need these slides. The couple of things that I'd like to point out are the lighting on the south side of the property along the parking is existing to remain. We're not touching that. Where the drive is where there are current street lights that are going to be removed. And for safety, we'd like to place new street lights, but if they're going to be in conflict with code, we may not be able to do that. There will be bollards along the sidewalk on the north side of the drive for walkability, but we may not be able, it sounds like we may not be able to place street lights on the south side of that access driveway. We did drive by the site earlier before this meeting and confirmed that there is a street light, city street light on that southeast corner. There is also a power pole that does not look to have anything hooked up to it. The question is whose responsibility it would be to move that if the ADA ramp is to be installed. The last thing is the monument sign. We did show that in the location kind of central to the site, and we'd just like to point out that it might be also useful to have a monument sign on Ivy Street for wayfinding. So other than that, we're here for questions, and thank you for your time.
Any questions? No. Thank you very much. I also have a Mr. Craig Gingrich, is that correct? Yes. Okay.
Thank you for listening. I'm here with from 1535 South Ivy, and I'm here to represent the Board of Directors at Hope Village and the owner of the property. And we just wanted to indicate that this has been a need on the campus for some years and have been in dialogue with Marquee and are just very pleased that they're willing to add these services. It's a greatly needed service to our campus. So I'm really here to just answer questions if you have any about the property. Campus.
Any questions?
No, I don't have any.
Thank you. Is there anybody that is here this evening that would like to speak against this proposal? Is there anybody here that is neutral and would like to speak? Public testimony is closed. We'll start with you this time, Derek.
All right.
Could I interrupt just for a second? I did forget to mention that we did just today get some public input, answering questions on.
Okay.
This was from, they're in the audience, Tom and Julie Russ. They were asking about, under my mic up, as far as I could tell, they were asking about the maintenance of the common open space, basically the grounds. And, you know, in particular, I would think it's around this addition area and what part Marquee versus Hope Village has in that, and whether there's any existing contractual agreement or bylaws or something that outlines how maintenance is taken care of. And that is a normal thing to think about with a planned unit development, is that you have common areas. And what I pointed out to them in response was basically that having a homeowners association that usually has covenants and restrictions and such isn't necessarily something you would find when there's one single owner. This isn't a subdivision. And so I told them that I wasn't sure it was really applicable, but it's still applicable that the entity that owns this, Hope Village, is responsible for maintaining the campus grounds that are around Hope Village, and the arrangement they have around the Marquee Center may be different than what is done on the remainder, and that might have been what they were trying to get after.
So, Greg, is that something that you can help us out with? Yeah, come on up and,
So currently, Marquee pays our services for grounds and pays a maintenance fee to take care of the property. So we assume that that'll be what we continue with. Same amount of property, so. Actually, it'll be less. It'll be less property.
less property, less mowing. Okay, does that help you out, Brian?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Any other,
In the back.
I guess I have to reopen the public testimony again. So come on up, and state your name and address, please.
I'm Julie Rushton, 1441 South Ivy Street, Hope Village. I am the person that asked that question, but Brian has totally misconstrued my question altogether, so I'd like to clarify. I had no concerns about maintenance in any way, shape, or form. My concern and my question, and I've been trying for a long time to get an answer to this question, is what is the agreement between Marquee and Hope Village, because Hope Village owns the land on which Marquee has put the building, and I have been asking for some time to have access to the original agreement that was made when Marquee came on the site of what is the agreement between Hope Village Incorporated and Marquee. And that's what I'm asking for. I have no concerns about maintenance whatsoever. I don't care.
What would be the sort, I mean, what seems to be the...
Well, I don't
Pebble in your shoe
understand
here.
what the relationship is between Hope Village, who owns that property, and Marquee, who's building. I would like to see the grounds, it's called the grounds agreement that was originally made when Marquee was put on that property. And from what I can read in the staff's own reports, they're supposed to submit a copy of that information as a condition to this application, and I can't seem to get anyone to produce that document. And that's what I'm looking for. It has nothing whatsoever to do with grounds maintenance. I don't care what they do with the grounds maintenance.
I guess my question would be is what is the source of your, what is...
I want to know what the agreement is, the lease agreement or whatever it is between Marquee and Hope Village.
Might be something that you would need to speak with
Can't get it from Hope
Greg
Village.
or the
They
board. I don't know if
refuse
that's
to
something that we
give us information.
So I really don't believe, and she's trying to tie it because there's a statement in the code that talks about, but that statement is directly tied to subdivisions, and this isn't a subdivision, where you need to know that homeowners associations, private property ownership arrangement is being made for those common shared areas. In this case, we don't have that link. I don't really think it's a review criteria for us to delve
It's in your
into that.
document as a review criteria. I sent it to you today. It's in your actual document.
You mean the statement that we're supposed to get it? Is that what you're referring to?
It's there. You just need to read my email.
I don't believe it's a review criteria that we delve into the individual arrangement that they have.
That would, it would seem to me that would be a matter between the landlord and the leasee.
It says in the city document that they are to provide that document. So then it becomes a public document, and we should have access to that. I can send it to you if there's a way to communicate, but that's what I was asking for. It had nothing to do with
Oh,
landscaping at all.
okay, well, I'm not familiar with what you're referring to, so you might send it to Brian, and we will direct Brian to send it to us.
Brian has it.
Then, Brian, I assume you can send it to us.
Or do that. I can also send it to the city attorney since I just got it today. He didn't have time to look at it because I can't help her. I don't know what.
I'm just asking you to comply what's in the staff report that says they are requiring this information to be submitted with the application. There's a check mark that says they have produced it, but it's not there.
That in our staff report?
No, it's on the application form where they go through and they check mark all the things that they're supposed to submit. And they checked that box, so she was looking for it, and I don't think it exists. It's not something that was submitted with the application, even though they checked the box. And I think I don't know why they checked the box, but I still don't believe it's something that is required because it's not a subdivision.
Because it's private property.
Yeah, it's one individual owner, and it's whatever arrangements they make, because we know that they're responsible. But in this particular case, there's this other entity that's on the property. It's kind of like the situation the city has with our adult center and the swim center on school property. Well, they kind of have their own private arrangement going on, same kind of thing. And so it can get a little complicated when you have city facilities built on someone else's land, and I think that's what she's looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve. Or not. You each have had a turn. Larry, want to give it a shot here?
If I can find it.
Here it is, right here.
Yeah, I make a motion to, it's this one.
So, yeah.
Make a motion to approve CUP 18-04 /PUD 18-02.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you very much. Now we're down to final decisions. So I will entertain a motion to have a final decision for ZC 18-04 zoning map amendment.
One question for Brian before we start on that. You got four final decisions listed here.
One of them
Yeah,
is from last time.
and the first one, remind you that that's not one that you've been working on. That's continued so that we had time to write up the written findings of your recommended denial of the rezoning associated with the Canby Townhome rezone. And so I do hope that you had a chance to look at that, because I took a little bit of leeway trying to place your intent in that for your reasons for denial. And that will be shared tomorrow, if we get your signature on it tonight with the city council as they view the rezoning on October 3rd.
But we denied that.
That's right. And so this is written up with your recommended denial. That's your findings, written findings.
For denial of it.
Right. Okay. So,
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the final findings for ZC 18-04 zoning map amendment, Bussey.
a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Final decision for ANN 18-03/ZC 1803 North Pine Annexation and Zoning Map Amendment.
Chair, I move that we approve the final findings for ANN 18-03/ZC 18-03 North Pine Annexation and Zoning Map Amendment.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And lastly,
Well, not lastly, but, Mr. Chair, sorry. Approve final decision on SUB 18-03 Pine Place subdivision.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm sorry. Lost my place again. Okay, and now lastly.
Now the last, okay.
Chair, I make a motion that we do a final approval of CUP 18-03/PUD 18-022 Marquee Expansion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Brian, items of interest from you.
Oh, we do not have any applications for the next meeting. I would not anticipate that we could get this text amendment we just talked about tonight before you for that either. That's not enough time frame to have a first evidentiary hearing because DLCD has to have 35 days notice.
I think as long as we get the wheels rolling, turning on that.
Well, and we kind of did because we already know, we think, how we would change the wording. It's just simple as can be. So,
Our next regularly scheduled meeting is for Monday, October 8th, but you're saying that we don't have any business?
that's right. So I usually like to just wait and we'll send you notice of an official cancellation, but I wanted you to know it's almost certain that that's probably what we'll be doing. There's stranger things have happened, so, but I'm almost positive that's what we'll be sending you.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Any items of interest or guidance from us to Brian?
Well, I might share with you, just to keep you in the loop. We'll try to we forwarded it to the city council. They made favorable comments about an internal document that we try to keep up and have been particularly difficult to do that in the past several months. But Laney finally did it and improved it. And it's a tracker of all of the applications and shows you where they're at in the process, from inquiry to pre-app to land use to construction, under construction, and occupancy. And shows you everything that, because we have responsibilities all the way through that, not just at these meetings. And it's a good way to know what's going on. And our attempt is maybe to try to keep that, revise it bi-monthly, because we do a bi-monthly report to the city council. And so that's what our attempt is going to be. And we'll try to share that with you as well. We'll send that to you. And the other thing is we attended last week the pre-application for the Shakespeare coded project in the industrial park, which is an initial 526,000 square foot distribution center that could expand to 700 and some thousand square feet. And they're rushing as fast as they can to try to bring it to you by December 10th. And they have a lot of traffic study to get done before that happens.
Is there a reason that December 10th is magic?
Their schedule to move in and occupy the building.
Good luck to them.
This is the building that's already being constructed, right?
No, no. I mean, it's in the idea stage right now, but they know what they're doing. They've got a site plan. They know exactly what they're going to build. They just have to go through the approval process now, and so they're keeping us hopping to try to do things as efficiently as we can, but still do what we need to do to make sure it's the right thing for Canby.
Anything else? Gentlemen, move to adjourn.
What are they distributing?
Tell you, that's why it's Shakespeare.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We didn't give them back their